So, what has returning to Raccoon City opened up for you for connecting the cinematic universe with the game universe?
Well, in the movie, we're returning to the Hive, returning to Raccoon City. Those two things are obviously from the video game universe. You know, the very first game was set in a mansion in the woods outside of Raccoon City that had this lab, which we called the Hive, underneath it, infested with the worst kind of creatures and horrors and terrors. So we're returning to that. We're bringing characters both from the video game franchise, Claire Redfield here, but also characters from the film franchise with Mila's character Alice. So it's kind of like the greatest hits, both of the video game franchise and the film franchise.
With what Capcom is doing with the game franchise, has that influenced you in creating the movies?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've always been heavily influenced by the games. You know, the first thing I did when I signed to do the very first movie was fly to Japan, meet the creator of the game, pitch him my idea, which I spent 2 days doing through a translator. Then he made his comments. When I write a script now, it's always sent to Capcom. They always give their thoughts. I always take that into account. You know, because while the film franchise and the video game franchise are slightly separate, we never want to do anything that kind of like messes with their world and vice versa. So there's a lot of communication between us.
What are you folks doing to up the ante in this movie?
This is by far the best Resident Evil movie, and I think that's for the main reason for that is that we've juxtaposed the big action that the franchise has become known for with the kind of horror that we had in the very first movie. You know, the first movie was very intense. It was all set in one location, underground, very claustrophobic. And horrific, I think. Some great traps, you know, when Colin Salmon got chopped up in the laser grid. I mean, it was shocking. And I feel as the franchise went along, it became more action-oriented. Now we go back to the Hive and are back to the kind of horrific feeling of the first movie. So really, this one is combining big action with big horror, which is really the first time we've done that. Because the first movie was a relatively low-budget film. I didn't have the kind of money to execute the big set pieces that we have in this. In fact, some of the ideas in this film were originally, you know, I had 15 years ago, but we couldn't actually execute them. So I wanted to kill people in unpleasant and spectacular ways in the Hive back in Berlin 15 years ago. Finally, Sony gave me the money to do it. So some of these scenes, I mean, they've been a long time coming.
What do you think is the reason for the success for both the movie franchise and the game franchise in nerd culture?
I think they've always changed and evolved. I think that's very important. If you look at the game franchise, they weren't scared to introduce new characters and new locations. You know, it's not like Tomb Raider where, as good as Lara Croft was, people became tired of playing Lara Croft. You know, the game franchise always introduced new characters, and we've kind of done that as well. We've always told new stories. And I think that sometimes we've been criticized for that because we've deviated slightly from the games. But I feel like that's been the strength of the movie franchise because we've expanded the universe. We haven't just done a straight adaptation. We've shown the fans new and interesting things. And I think in this return to Raccoon City and to the Hive, fans will learn more about the Umbrella Corporation than they've ever known before. You know, they're going to discover all the dark secrets of Umbrella, of Alice, of the Red Queen, kind of answer a lot of questions that people have had for like the last 10, 15 years.
Awesome. And finally, Resident Evil 7 is coming out for VR. Do you have any thoughts about virtual reality gaming?
I love VR. I mean, I've always been an early adopter. I loved 3D when it first came out. You know, I was right on the cutting edge of that. We were the first native 3D movie to come out after Avatar. And I love VR for exactly the same reason. Anything that can kind of expand the world of gaming and the world of movies and make them more immersive, I want to be involved in.